My name is Mission, and I am a homesteader, and I am the face behind a lovely place called Home. That is my handle, that is my website. Today we are going to talk about how to set up your first raised bed garden and not fail in year one. How is that going to happen? Let me tell you. You're listening to a lovely place called Home podcast, exploring homesteading and off-grid life and how it actually works. This is a place for practical conversations about real systems, cost breakdowns, and what it really takes to build this kind of life. I don't grow in this method anymore, but I did for several years do raised bed gardening. I've now moved on to market gardening and gardening in 30-inch beds in the ground. This is the classic market gardener system. But I do have extensive experience, I would say, in raised bed gardening. By raised bed, I do mean these are still on the ground, but you have wooden boxes built around them. This can also be raised all the way up. I know some people who are handicapped or have mobility issues, they do raised bed gardening super high up. So keep in mind, this can work for that as well. So everything I say today, I am going to explain in kind of you are an extreme beginner to this method and you think you're going to fail or you failed in the past, and I'm going to try to help you the best that I can avoid all of those failures. Number one thing we want to do to start is planning the size of our garden. How many raised beds do you want to do? I would say if this is your first time ever, I would do 6. These are 6 that are about 30 inches wide or 36 inches wide by, say, 8 or 10 feet long. I would probably do 8. So 3 by 8, and I would do like 6 of them. 3 if you're like, no, that sounds like way too many. I don't want to do that many. Then 3. Okay, so you want to plan how wide you want it to be, how long you want them to be. To avoid failure, this is where the avoiding failure comes in, do not make them too wide or you'll have to start walking down the middle, and you can't really walk down the middle of a raised bed. I mean, you can if they're on the ground, but you're kind of compacting the soil there and eliminating the fact that it's raised because you're just smashing down the soil all the time. So you want to make it narrow enough that you can reach everything from either side that you're standing on, which would be, I would say the max would be 4 feet because you can kind of reach 2.5 feet in on each side. But I would feel more comfortable, especially for spacing and how plants like to grow. I would definitely do 30 inches or 36 inches. That's something you're going to have to figure out for your mobility, your age, what you want to grow, things like that. But you definitely need to plan that out, especially since you're going to be buying lumber. You want to make sure that you're buying the right amount of lumber so you're not making all those trips back and forth to the lumber store. Next, you want to pick a space in your yard that is optimal for growing. This is where I see a lot of people fail. They're like, it's going to be the perfect space over here because the kids' play center is here, and then it can be around here, and then the kids can be blah, 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 blah. And the thing is underneath like a maple tree, and it's not getting sun half the day, or it's in a low spot, and every time it rains, you didn't realize it before, but you know now, it's just murky all the time. Or it's in a space where there's a lot of wind. So if it's right against, say you are on the side of a highway and you have it near the highway, the wind is going to whip up into your yard at that spot that you're planting. So all these different things that could potentially fail your garden, you want to think about. So you want to think about optimal location for sunlight. So observe, spend some time observing. When it rains, where does the water go? Where does it not go? When it's sunny, when my sun is coming up, where is it hitting the longest throughout the day? When it's up at noon, at 3, at 7, all of those things. If you have massive pines somewhere on the east end of your property, you want to make sure that your garden is not situated where when the sun comes up, it's behind those pines for a long time. You want to put it somewhere else where the sun is hitting it more at, depending on the time of year, 7, 8 a.m. You also want to make sure that there's a couple of windbreaks around your garden so that it can protect it. These are things like some shrubs, trees that aren't super tall, super close to it. Even things like your house is a windbreak, a shed, a fence. Lots of things can be windbreaks. You just don't want to put your garden in like a tunnel. If you know, oh, it's always windy over there because of this, and there's no trees, and da-da-da, don't put it there. Vegetables don't really like the wind. They will definitely be hardy, but they'll be focusing so much on surviving that their production will be a little bit lower, or they could just straight up die. Some things are just so finicky, they're like, nope, screw this, dead. Another thing to consider with location, I know it might seem like a lot. You're factoring in wind, you're factoring in water, you're factoring in sun. The last thing I would say is very important to consider is proximity to your house, because you're probably at this scale going to be hand watering, so you won't be setting up an irrigation system at this garden. Maybe you will, that's cool, but most likely you're not. So you're getting your water with a watering can or some buckets with a watering can at the garden from your house hose. That means that your garden needs to be fairly close to your house. If it's super far away, you're going to be walking to and from it. If it's very far away, say you have your house, then you have a yard, then you have a barn, and then you're like, and then I'll put the garden behind the barn. That's probably not a good idea. You can't see it from the house. You have to walk all the way out there, and it seems more like a chore, like, oh, I'm leaving to go garden. Whereas if you have it very close to your house, you're kind of in and out, you're running into the house, you're making lunch, you're going back out. Everything's very close, and it also makes, again, watering very easy because you're just grabbing 2 watering cans, or I always used to do 2 5-gallon pails, and I'd carry them out to the garden, and my watering can stayed at the garden, and I'd just pour the water into the watering can, and then that's how I did it. And it was very close to the house, but I just didn't want to run a hose all the way out there because my children are obsessed with hoses and spraying everything. So I had to just do no hose. Another thing people forget or think they don't need to do is put a ground covering underneath your raised beds as well as surrounding the raised beds. Year 1, my first ever time doing a raised bed system, I didn't put anything around the walkways in between each bed or the surrounding area. And my gosh, the grass just grows right up, and it goes right up and in and then drops its little seeds all over my garden. It's also very hard to mow in between all of that. You have to do the weed whacker, and the weed whacker's hitting your raised beds and cutting all the little weed whacker spindly things. I don't know. It's just a mess. Okay. So instead, something that I found great success in, and I really encourage people to do this, it's not that labor intensive. And this is what I'm not going to say. Don't scrape your yard. If you have a lawn, you don't need to scrape the top layer of grass off. That's very labor intensive and very hard to do, especially for established grass. It is almost impossible to do just by hand. Like, I'm just going to roll up my grass. It doesn't work like that. Instead, getting landscape fabric and laying it out and pinning it down with rocks. So let's pretend super small scale. Let's pretend we have a 20 by 20 area, 20 foot by 20 foot. You're going to get your landscape fabric. You're going to roll it out the 20 feet. You're going to put rocks, little rocks to keep it flat. It will end up killing that area. And then you're going to put cardboard. So non-printed cardboard all on the whole entire bottom cardboard. This is going to kind of make sure that you've added this layer where plants can't grow up through very easily, because plants can still get UV rays from some landscape fabric and they'll continue to grow. So putting next layer, cardboard, wetting the cardboard so it doesn't blow away. Heavier cardboard that's wet kind of doesn't blow away. And then after that, wood shavings. So any type of wood shavings is really fine. I like to go to the free wood shavings. A lot of places, you might not know this, but a lot of places you can get wood shavings for free. People that do mulching, arborists, things like that, they normally have a wood chip pile and they just give it away to the public. So you can go get yourself a whole bunch of buckets or bags of wood shavings. Then you're going to put the wood shavings all on top. You can also do rocks. I don't do rocks. I don't like the look of rocks. Also, my kids throw rocks. If they throw a piece of wood, it's not a big deal. If they throw a rock, lawnmower doesn't like that. Feet don't like that. It's easier to do, for me, wood shavings, but you do want a top layer over top of that. So now imagine we have our 20 by 20. We've laid our landscape fabric down. We've got something to just kind of hold that landscape fabric down in the meantime. We've got all of our cardboard. We've laid it down. We've got our whatever you're choosing for your topping. We're going to say wood chips. You've laid down your wood chips, and now we build our raised bed garden boxes. This is where we're going to roll right over into what you're going to use. So you need to pick your wood. I don't do pressure treated. You can do pressure treated. I don't do pressure treated. I just do a good high quality wood, 2-inch by, I would do 10 or 12. So 2 by 10, 2 by 12. And then you're going to build your rectangular boxes on top of all of that. That's kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but you want to make sure you have a good base. Then you don't even have to worry about mowing. You don't have to worry about anything growing in. It eliminates a lot of weed pressure because you don't have the grass creating those weed seeds and blowing into your garden as much because you've kind of created a space around all of your growing beds. And that eliminates a lot of the weed pressure. And it also eliminates, a lot of annoyance, a lot of everything. Next, you're going to build those gardening beds. You have already chosen the size. So you're going to go to the lumber store. You're going to buy everything that you need. You can use screws. I would suggest using screws, not nails. You want to put it together, rectangles, square it up, and then you want to put them in that area that you have created. Then you're going to kind of do it again in a way, creating that base for that raised bed, eliminating the landscape fabric. So what I do is I do another layer of cardboard on the very bottom, the clean cardboard. Then I'll add something mulchy. So wood shavings mixed with leaves from in the forest, all composty things, like just lots of mulchy stuff at the bottom. And then as I get to that last 8 inches, that's where I'm going to focus more on soil health and quality. You're adding your proper amendments, your compost, your manure, your actual dirt soil, like your live living soil. You can also choose to add worms at this point. I have always just had soil that has lots of worms in it. So I'm like throwing all the worms in as much as I can. Worms are good for the garden. That is a misconception. A lot of people think worms are bad for gardens. Worms are so key for a great garden. You want to see earthworms in your garden. You don't want to see caterpillars. You don't want to see little flies, things like that. You do want to see worms. So you're going to build up all those layers again, and you're going to water it, making sure. And then you can choose whether to test your soil. I know we're still in kind of small home gardener land here, but you can get soil strip tests that you just wet your soil and you dip the soil tester in, and it kind of tells you your pH, it tells you acidity, it tells you all these different things about your soil so that you can have kind of the optimal soil. But I know a lot of people don't do that. They just kind of throw everything in there and they're like, this should be good. And normally it generally is for home gardens. Vegetables, the ones that you buy in the store, the seeds, they're very hardy. They're made for home gardeners. They're made to withstand a lot of stuff and not need as many amendments and as many things added as you might think. So don't worry too much about soil quality. I mean, you don't want to be putting in like, oh, look at all this sand mixed with clay. Throw it in there. We'll just add leaves on top. That's probably going to be really bad. That's going to end really badly. Or if you have this super wood chippy only leaves and you use only that, again, not going to grow. At a scale this small, you can even build up those first layers, the cardboard, wood chips, leaves, whatever you have lying around for the first base, the first few inches. Then you can go to something like Home Hardware, Canadian Tire, if you're American, I don't know, Lowe's, I don't know what you have down there. Wherever you get your soil, farm, Tractor Supply, you can get those big bulk bags of, not potting mix, of actual like gardening soil. It'll be labeled like for actual like growing of plants. And you can add a couple of those bags in, and then it can give you peace of mind. Like someone else did it, you're just adding it in. Another thing people do where they end up failing in this garden method is doing the wrong plants. So they think they can just plant anything, just like a garden in the ground or one of those big gardens with a fence around it can do. They think that their raised bed garden can also do that, and it can't really. So things like pumpkins and squash, vining squash, those are not something you want to be planting in a raised bed garden. And I only say that because they vine out, they trail away. So they not only take up a lot of space, but they're leaving that area that you have made and they're going out into the lawn where you can no longer, you're not going to pick up a pumpkin vine when you mow the lawn. Or if you're not mowing your lawn, if you have a natural area, if it's like on the side of a lawn where it's kind of like, it's like a dry lot, there's forest on the edge. Now it's going into the forest and you can't manage it, so you end up failing. And people are like, well, this is dumb because I'm just failing at this. That's just because you're planting the wrong plant. Make sure that they can actually stay within your garden limits and make sure that they can thrive within those limits. Plants that I would suggest for a raised garden system are tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, lettuce, things that you can put a trellis in. So you can even do a little V trellis and it will stay in that raised bed area. And you can plant things like peas, beans, vining beans, cucamelons, cucumbers, anything that needs to vine but stays relatively small. This is why I'm not suggesting this for your pumpkins and your squash. They get so massive that even if you built something, they're going to go up, they're going to go back down, and then they're going to leave again. They're just too much. So, but smaller vining things like that do very well in a raised bed garden system. Other things are, if you still want to squash, summer squash are amazing in raised bed garden systems. They're huge, but they stay like a big plant. They don't vine out. They become massive, so they do take up a lot of space, but the great thing about summer squash is they're high producing. I will mention something that a lot of people don't know about summer squash that I really try to push is there's zucchini. Summer squash is zucchini, most of them. Zucchini do not need to get as big as your arm before you harvest them. A lot of people think they're growing like a pumpkin. They're growing that zucchini until that sucker is so big, you could eat it for a month and it'd still be there. What you actually want to do is harvest your zucchini when they're between 6 to 8 inches long. The skin, the flesh, it's very soft. It's perfect for adding to salads, sauteing with something, barbecuing. So they're small. They're kind of like a banana, but they grow straight. They don't kind of curve. But 6 to 8 inches long is your optimal size for when you want to cut and harvest your summer squash, zucchini. So for a family, I would say 2 zucchini plants is going to provide you with delicious summer squash. Other things that are also good for a garden are bush beans, peppers, radishes. Lots of root vegetables are really good in these types of setups. They're not good for staying in the ground and doing a season extension method because your dirt is raised up in those beds and in a smaller area. It's a little bit harder to, say, leave your carrots. If you grow carrots in one of your raised beds, some people like to leave their carrots in their garden well into like November and continue to pick them in the dirt as the dirt starts to frost over. When you have a raised bed system, that garden is going to freeze up a lot quicker, so you can't leave them in as long, but they still grow just as well. If you have proper soil, your root vegetables will do really well. So carrots, turnips, beets, radishes, all those things do amazing in a raised bed garden system. Cut and come again items like romaine lettuce and kale, things like that also do very well in a raised bed garden. It's also optimal because since you're gardening on a smaller scale, you want to have more cut and come again items. There are more cut and come again items out there, but those are more where you want to practice season extension, or they are winter crops, so they don't necessarily do very well in the summertime. Like for me personally, celery, I can only grow celery like in the cold months. Celery in the summer is just terrible. It's just instant bolts, instant flowers. It is a cut and come again crop, but that's only something I can grow kind of in the off seasons. So it doesn't apply here for just the home gardener system, but if you want to practice season extension, keep celery in mind. Another thing that I see people fail at when they do their raised bed gardens is not ending their season properly. When you end your season with any garden, you want to pull all your produce out. You can leave your stems, your roots. You don't have to pull all the roots of everything out. It's actually more beneficial if you leave everything in there, because then they can incorporate back into the soil. But what people forget to do is they don't cover their garden beds. You should never, ever leave a garden bed empty to just have sun and elements beating on it. Never. You should be either cover cropping it, which a cover crop are things like buckwheat and rye, little things that can grow to a certain height, and then you flatten them down with something like a tarp, like a silage tarp. Or you can just skip the cover crop. Cover crops also benefit your garden. They add really nice things into the garden, as well as protect it from things like sun and wind and erosion. But you can skip that and you can just go straight to tarping. So you want to get like a thick black tarp, and you want to cover your beds before winter starts. So you're pulling your trellises out. If you have those little trellises we talked about for your peas, you want to pull those out. If you have homemade wood trellises, I always used to do that. You want to take those out, store them away, take all your little labels out, and you want to either cover crop and tarp, or skip right to tarping. You gotta cover that garden. Not only does it protect it from erosion, it also warms it up in the spring, because that black tarp, now your soil is warming, as well as the chance of weed seeds landing in that garden for the rest of the fall, for all of the spring, that's eliminated because you have a tarp on it. So you can take that tarp off and you have a beautiful garden underneath that's warmed because the tarp has warmed it, and it's ready for planting. A couple of other things I just wanted to quickly note of things that I see people doing with a raised bed garden system that in turn makes them end up quitting are things like building a garden bed that's too high up, that's on legs. I'm telling you, they always break. I've yet to see one last more than a couple of years. They're very hard to work in. Another thing that I see people doing that in turn leads to failure is their raised bed garden is massive and like all over the place. So instead of like uniform rows for their raised garden, everything is every which way. When you get to a certain point in gardening, you start wanting to use tools like wheelbarrows or the man-sized carts, pulling carts. Things like that you want to start incorporating into your gardening, even bins, wider bins for harvesting. If all of your raised beds are super close together or every which way and you can't go down aisles and there are no aisles, it's just like a maze. Some people like that because it looks really beautiful, but you just need to keep in mind it can lead to failure because it makes it a little bit harder. It makes it like, well, I want to do this. It's just so much and I can't put the wheelbarrow down it and blah, 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 blah. It turns out to be kind of more finicky. So that's another way I see people fail is they make it huge, but then it's a little bit chaotic and it can lead to inefficiency and burnout with gardening, frankly. Another thing I see people doing is not placing your vegetables in the optimal plant spacing. A lot of people think that they have to plant in rows, like mass production farming, that everything has to be in a row, or that the back of that seed packet that's like, some of them I think are absolutely ridiculous. They're like, plant every 3 feet, 18 inches apart, and it's like a beet. I'm like, who made this? You can plant a lot of plants closer together than you might think. So people do raised bed gardening, but then they'll only plant, say, lettuce. They'll do like one row of lettuce 2 feet apart in an entire 30-inch by 8-foot long raised bed. You can plant lettuce very close together. So that's something that you will need to learn. It's a crop by crop thing, but you can plant a lot of vegetables close together. It's kind of one of those things you learn along the way. Like most of the time, the reason they want spacing is for factory farming. So a tractor is doing this, a tractor's harvesting. Hence, the spacing is very weird because the tractor's doing the harvesting, or because they're heavy feeders. So if something is a heavy feeder, that means it needs a lot of amendments, it needs a lot of compost, it needs all that dirt around it. And you don't want the plants to be competing for those amendments. So if you're amending your soil with things like chicken manure and leaves and compost and things like that, if you're front loading that amending, which means you're putting all of that into the garden first, then planting, they should be good, especially on a small scale. So a heavy feeder, you can Google it. You can be like, well, I have these radishes. Are they heavy feeders? Let me Google that. By the way, radishes are not. Things like that, plants like that, you need to know what are heavy feeders, what are not. That normally lends itself to the spacing suggestions on the back of your packet or what you've learned. And what I'm saying is that might not necessarily apply to you. Like lettuce, again, lettuce can be planted as long, say you're doing butter crunch, so it's coming out into a beautiful head. Those leaves of each plant can touch each other. So you could do like 3 rows of lettuce a foot apart all the way down, and they're going to be okay. They're going to grow out to be beautiful, and you can harvest them wonderfully. And then the third thing is something like a tomato plant. The reason we space our tomatoes so far apart, they do need more amendments, one, but also for harvesting. Tomatoes actually get really massive and really wide, and they need that space. So their roots the plant stalk, it could be close together in theory if you're feeding it properly. But then once it grows up, it needs so much space because they just spread right out. Same with cucumbers. That's why they have the recommended spacing. But again, for this gardening system, I would not say to plant, if you have a 30-inch raised bed, let's say, 1 tomato plant with 3 feet around it. I would not do that personally on this small of a scale. Instead, in that 3-foot plot, I would probably plant like 4 tomato plants. You only have 4. You're not in a greenhouse where there's hundreds and now you can't get through it. You can walk on each side. You know, you're at the end. You're going around and around. It's one season. You're not looking for market gardener production here. They don't need to be clipped and to have, you know, the grafting and all of those things. You're just doing an heirloom tomato, a field tomato. They're going to do well outside. You can do those classic round trellises that you kind of plunk in. There's 4 of them. So again, keep that in mind. Those are all things I see people, they feel like they've failed at it because they barely got anything out of these gardens. And it's sometimes because it's not the soil, it's not the sun. Everything is great, but they're only planting a couple things because they're following a guideline that may not necessarily be for the raised bed garden system. I truly do believe that if you follow these best practices and if you take all of these steps and put that work in and put that thought in, you will succeed with your garden. I don't want to make false promises, but the thing with gardening is sometimes you just have to follow the rules. Sometimes you can just throw things in and watch it grow and be like, wow, that was easy. But gardening is a little bit more finicky like that. It's kind of like baking. Some things with baking, you can just throw this and that in. But other things, you really have to follow a formula so that you can see your success, so that you can see the fruits of your labor, haha, pun. That is the same thing with gardening. You do want to follow certain procedures to get your optimal outcome. So if you follow these certain methods and this certain way of gardening, you're almost sure of success. If a natural disaster doesn't come wipe everything out, you're almost sure of success. Something that I didn't cover here that I feel like it just broadens out too far into the gardening zone and it kind of leaves raised bed gardening is pest control and things like that. I didn't touch on it because pest control is something that is on a plant by plant basis. It's also true for whatever method of gardening you're using. Say you're gonna plant cabbage. Whether you're planting it like me, a market gardener method, whether you're planting it in a greenhouse, whether you're planting it in a raised garden bed, you're probably gonna have that stupid caterpillar that comes and eats all of the cabbage, okay? So you want to make sure that you're planning for pest control no matter what you're doing. That's why I'm not really talking a lot on pest control and, what nets to use, when to use them, when not to use them. That's something that's kind of going to be up to you with the plants that you choose. I hope that this helped you. I hope that you're feeling inspired, and I truly hope that you take the leap and you do a raised garden. It's so fun. It's kid friendly. It's grandparent friendly. It's everybody friendly. If you do a garden this year, please tag me. Tag me on Instagram. Tag me wherever you are, okay? Tag me. I want to see your garden. If you have any questions about raised bed gardening, please comment. I will answer them. If I don't know the answer, I will direct you to a resource. I will direct you to somebody who knows the answer. I want everybody to have a garden. I want everybody to feel that feeling when you plant something and you harvest it and you're smelling it and you're eating it, and it is just the best feeling in the world. That's all for today, folks. See ya.